welcome to A Bold and Distant Future. We are continuing with another installment of our ongoing series, The Bright Endarkenment. And today's episode is called Nick Land, Curtis Yarvin, The Dark Enlightenment. And it's The Dark Enlightenment Stream 4, Part 1, The Theory. Boy, that's pretty ominous, Scooter. The Theory.
I like that laugh in the background, too. That was good.
So where we go? And I see very faintly Looney Tunes, so this gets pretty out there, huh?
We are traveling. We're going through the mirror on this one, through the looking glass. So, we're going to talk about this theory. We're going to talk about Nick Land, Curtis Yarvin, mostly about Nick Land, somewhat less about Curtis Yarvin. So let's get started. Then first thing I want to mention is the idea of neo-reaction. Neo-reactionism is actually a sort of synonym for the Dark Enlightenment. These are, if you see that little graph on the right, you can kind of see how the various streams we've talked about up to this point come together in the concept of neo-reaction. There's a focus on, I'm going to go from right to left, patriotic nationalism, into which we can enfold Christian nationalism, technology, capitalism, which we can, capitalism is anarcho-capitalist. We talked a lot about that. Technology we're about to get into. And then the tradition, patriarchy, we talked about that in the last couple of episodes, particularly focusing on traditionalism. Rene Guénon and Julius Evola. So,
I like this term race realist in the text.
Have you heard that term before?
I have not, but it seems appropriate for this group.
But boy, those three overlapping areas that meet in the middle with neo-reaction, it seems like it covers Trump's demographic pretty well,
Indeed.
So, just go through this real quick. I'll try to read this fast because we've got a few slides to get through here. So the neo-reaction shares an enthusiasm for markets and decentralization with the libertarians. It differs insofar as it also favors strong centralized authoritarianism with minimal government intrusion into business and technology, much less issues surrounding social justice. Some neo-reactionaries, along with Herman Hoppe, admire monarchy. Others, most, advocate novel governance models such as privately managed city-states. It would be a lot of fun to go through some of these projects that they've had, trying to set up libertarian utopias and how badly they've failed. We could do maybe 20 minutes on that at some point if you're interested. It's fairly amusing.
Is that what the tech bros are trying to do out in the San Joaquin Valley when they bought that giant ass piece of land that they want to build a new completely tech whatever city out there?
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
It's in between Fairfield and Vacaville and Sacramento out in the Delta. And it's a huge chunk of property they bought. They just gotta get all their clearances and shit, so that they can make it happen.
Well, the community there came out against it strongly, and I don't think it's going forward. But they were trying to set up one of these privately governed areas.
They just take over Bohemian Grove and have done with it. All right, so the alt-right, which is basically that patriotic national wing over there. The alt-right is focused on identity politics, read white supremacy, and ultra-jingoist nationalism. Neo-reactionism originated as a rejection of democracy, hence there is an overlap between the two. Parts of the neo-reaction movement have engaged with or promoted racial hierarchy and, quote, scientific racism, unquote. The scientific racism is basically like what drove the eugenics movement, for example, and the Nazis. Both Curtis Yarvin and Nick Land spill an inordinate amount of ink on the subject. Both deny that they are fundamentally racist, more like race realists. So the idea behind race realism is I'm not racist, but science says ... So Nick Land, for example, just to demonstrate that he's not fundamentally racist, has a degree of contempt for the people in Appalachia, Scots-Irish. And he has an interesting theory, which I'll just mention briefly. His feeling is that European civilization, which is, the soundest, the most progress, the best of all possible worlds, didn't really take off until after the 1600s when people stopped marrying their cousins. He goes on and on about this. In Appalachia, of course, you know what the term Hoosier is?
Yeah.
You've heard the term Hoosier.
Yeah,
Do you know what it means?
Not really, no.
Isn't it a term that indicates you're in a particular area and you are one heck of a good basketball player? Or at least you are a basketball player.
Indiana or something? Where are Hoosiers from? Indiana?
Indiana.
Yeah.
It means who's your father?
Oh,
Hoosier.
Mm-hmm.
I never heard that before.
I had to drag it out of somebody from Indiana who finally broke and told me. It's a bit of a kind of a family secret, if you will.
Very interesting.
Crazy.
So yeah, he basically sees the Scots-Irish of Appalachia as a bunch of ancestral cretins. Just to the side, something interesting. So, the first person I'm going to talk about, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it, is this guy, Mencius Moldbug.
That's Nick Land's pseudonym, right?
No, it's Curtis Yarvin's
that's
pseudonym.
Curtis Yarvin, okay.
That's Curtis Yarvin, who lives in your area. Maybe you could invite him on the show.
I don't know where he hangs.
All right, so I don't have a lot to say about this guy. There's a couple of concepts I want to jump on, and then we'll move on to Nick Land. So the first concept is this idea of a cathedral. It's not a particularly new idea, but the name is Yarvin's. The cathedral, it is almost like the elite theory, right? What the John Burgess might have called the insiders, although that has a whole other aspect to it. What we often call the oligarchy. So what is the cathedral? It consists of elite universities, think the Ivy Leagues, plus Stanford, plus a few others, using Berkeley, for example. Elite universities, especially prestigious research universities, that's kind of important. Mainstream news organizations, but I think you could also include in that a variety of different periodicals and things that actually do have a sort of largely centrist, either to the left or to the right, like The Atlantic, for example, or, I don't know. What is the magazine that's produced by Heritage Foundation?
I'm not familiar.
Not really mainstream, actually, but it's Strike That, not the Heritage Foundation. But opinion magazines that emanate out of this sort of milieu. Magazines that you need to read if you're going to stay kind of within the tribe. And obviously New York Times to a great degree, Washington Post now to a much, much lesser degree, and so on and so forth. And it includes parts of the professional bureaucracy as well as NGOs. And then other cultural institutions. I think you could probably include the entertainment industry in that influence. I want to highlight educated opinion. So the cathedral is focused on, movers and changers, people who can actually make substantial political donations, who can set up foundations, and so on and so forth. And put foundations in here, that should be part of this. So these institutions function like an established church, hence the term cathedral. They define acceptable moral and political beliefs. I think the Overton window, educating and socializing new members into those beliefs. Think about all those legacy kids that go off to Harvard and go through the machine. Marginalizing ideas outside the accepted consensus. We see that. We've seen it all our lives. Conferring legitimacy on those who adhere to its norms. So there's this sort of orthodoxy. And cathedral is the true source of political power. So any questions about that?
So it's sort of a loosely aligned group of people or idea makers who enforce a sort of like you're saying, orthodoxy or view. Who's the Pope of the cathedral? Is there one particular central person that's at the center of this? Is it Yarvin or someone else?
No, I think it's somewhat more Episcopalian
How so? What do you mean?
than Catholic. Well, basically, everybody's kind of in charge of their own diocese.
Oh, I see.
There's no central authority figure other than the king. So we don't have a king yet. But yeah. So the other idea that Yarvin is known for is this idea of neo-cameralism, which reimagines governance as a corporate entity where shareholders elect a CEO/monarch with absolute power. The model is inspired by Frederick the Great's Prussia, which I know virtually nothing about, and modern Singapore, which I know one or two things about, that prioritizes efficiency over pluralism and frames political dissent as a systemic bug. There's the kind of the leader and kind of the founder of Singapore is Lee Kuan Yew. And that's an inspiring quote by him. The human being is an unequal creature. That is a fact. And we start off with that proposition. All the great religions, all the great movements, all the great political ideology say, let us make human beings as equal as possible. In fact, he's not equal, never will be.
I will say that is he still alive? He was revered while we were there because he had created a system of housing ownership and construction that would enable, I want to say it was 87% of the Singaporean population to own their own flat. That in itself was one of his biggest accomplishments. And of course, he had this whole plan on how he wanted to import people from other local Asian populations that would keep his economy growing, blah, blah. He had this whole master plan for how that worked. And as you know, Singapore is a financial hub for the world now.
Oh, yeah, it's perfect. I think China's headed very consciously in this direction, state-controlled capitalism. And I'm not saying that, he doesn't do well by his people. Obviously, he pretty much did, although if you were a dissenter, you basically were expecting to be put away for a while. But they have these bizarre laws, just as an aside. It used to be that chewing gum was criminalized and get you a year in jail, if not more. You can now chew gum in Singapore, but you have to have a doctor's prescription.
I'll never forget the moment we stepped on the Singaporean soil for the first time and seeing the poster that had like 20 things you're not supposed to do, and one of them was peeing on the street. And one of the local women who got off the train with us had her kid crouched down in the gutter and pee right there.
Not smart.
Like, all right.
Really not smart. Isn't Singapore where that guy got caned?
Michael Fay.
Yeah, that was Singapore, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's also illegal to pee in the elevator. In fact, a lot of the elevators in Singapore apparently have urine detectors, and they will lock the door and notify the police if you do pee in the elevator.
As long as they don't do that for durian in the elevators, we're safe.
Durian is also illegal. Thank you for mentioning that.
Is Singapore a model for the surveillance state? Do they have surveillance cameras everywhere? How are they enforcing these kind of, wacky laws and rules?
I can't say now. They didn't then, unless, maybe they have it in certain, like the MRT was all over the islands. I forget what they called it. LRT, the light rail system, was being expanded to go into neighborhoods, so you wouldn't really have to walk more than a quarter mile to get to one and take public transit everywhere quite efficiently.
Interesting.
So they might have had them in those places. I'm not sure.
All right, moving on. So we'll talk a little bit here about Nick Land, just by way of introduction. Nick Land can be kind of summarized by this statement: what happens when capitalism, computation, intelligence stop being tools that humans can control and become themselves forces that reshape humans themselves. And I got this off of artificial intelligence.
That's fitting.
I said, summarize Nick Land, and ChatGPT did this.
Wow. It's pretty self-reflexive, huh?
Yeah. Actually, full disclosure, I used a lot of ChatGPT on this, so it's all pretty much open AI from here to the end.
Wow.
A lot of these concepts I can kind of understand at a very high level, but getting them into understandable prose kind of needed ChatGPT. So I pulled down their definitions and then I reword them. And there's a bit of that here. So we'll talk about a few influences first. I think they're fairly significant. Guy Deleuze and Felix Guattari. You guys heard of these guys?
Nope.
All right. Well, Deleuze he's a French philosopher, and Guattari is a psychoanalyst, and they collaborated on a bunch of books, including one called Capitalism and Schizophrenia, which is divided into 2 volumes, Anti-Oedipus and 1,000 Plateaus. I've read sections of Anti-Oedipus, largely as I was kind of developing these slides. It's been around for a while. If you go into the theory section at City Lights Books, you'll find it there. Assuming that City Lights Books is still there and they still have a theory section.
City Lights was almost going to be closed forever, and I believe somebody bought it. It is still running, but I'm not sure what their current political bent is.
Is Roland Getty still alive?
No, he passed away. He turned 100.
Yeah.
He died at like 101.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, City Lights without Ferlinghetti is going to be a tough slog.
I was there about 6 months ago and got a book, but it's a nice little place.
It is. It's a cool book. It's a cool bookstore.
I used to take dates there.
Ooh.
They never developed into anything. I'm not sure why. So when we're talking about these two guys, we're specifically looking at these concepts that come out of Anti-Oedipus. They are anti-humanist, and there's several different varieties of anti-humanism. There's a sort of positive anti-humanism light, which these guys sort of are, and then there's anti-humanism evil. We'll get into that. So what do they talk about? The autonomous individual to reject the notion of self-contained rational subjects who exist prior to social and material relations. They spend a lot of time talking about these relations. And the next slide will dive into that a little bit. They do not believe that humans are fundamentally separate from animals, machines, ecosystems, or technologies. Now, it's probably fairly evident that we're not separated from animals insofar as we are animals, nor that we are separate from ecosystems as we are finding out. But we don't necessarily think of ourselves in terms of machines or of ourselves as technologies.
I would love to find an article that we were given by a friend of ours who was a science teacher while we were in Singapore about the merger of technology and humans.
Well, there's this whole thing called transhumanism, which we're not going to touch on in this series of slides, but we will touch on later. That is basically that. It's the conjoining of technology with organic human life to the point
I'm sure
where
it'll happen.
It's already happening.
We'll all get the chip. There'll be outlaws.
When chips are outlawed, only outlaws will have chips. No, it'd be the other way around.
Yeah.
They argue that there's no timeless essence that defines what it means to be human. Instead, they see people as constituted, there's another word I'm looking for here, but it doesn't come to mind, through interactions with biological, social, political, technological, and environmental processes. And what does that look like? Can you read this okay? For some reason, I'm not seeing everything I want to see here.
I can read it.
Yeah. Desiring machines are a concept introduced by Gilles Deleuze and Felix Guattari in their work Anti-Oedipus, where they describe them as systems that produce desire and operate through interruptions and connections, illustrating how desire functions as a productive force rather than a lack. This idea emphasizes the interconnectedness of human experience and the material world, suggesting that everything is a part of a continuous process of production.
Go ahead.
I was going to say almost Buddhist, where everything is a part of everything.
Interesting connection there. Yeah, I agree.
Notice I said almost.
So this is not particularly original, but they take it to an interesting place where they see the advancement, the exponential rise of technology as pushing in this direction, to the point where I think Nick Land came up this, I'm not sure, that they expect sooner or later after this, we know we're approaching the singularity when AI learns to masturbate.
Damn.
Wow.
Yeah, play with that for a while. I'm not going to spend any time really on
No
this.
pun intended, huh? Play with that for a while. Oh my God.
Yeah, thanks. So here's a list of things that kind of define what that all means. Desire machines. I'm not going to spend any real time on this, but it's here, and if anybody wants to pause it at this point, this comes from this YouTube channel, which looks really interesting, and probably want to spend more time on that. But he goes into, this is about a 16-minute video. He goes into this, he goes into bodies without organs, and other things like that. So he kind of presupposes some, or at least predicts, a merging of technology and human physiology, including the brain. So, interesting times. But one point, human and natural processes operate through networks of interconnected machines, and they give the examples of mouth and breast, lungs, and air, forming a continuous chain of production. But they also have the idea that for every machine that produces a flow, another machine interrupts that flow. A good example would be like your bowels, make you want to take a shit, but your sphincter cuts it off. They use that analogy. That's not original with me. So,
who's this Joey at the end? It says Bruno.
Oh, interesting guy. I don't know anything about him other than what I heard on this little broadcast. Joey was a kid who survived on machines. So he had a breathing machine, he had a feeding tube, he had a machine that would extract his bowel movements. Pretty much every organic function he had to be adopted, augmented. That's the word I'm looking for. Augmented by technology, and they see that as a perfect example of what the mode of desiring production looks like, and suggest that, we look at that, the poor kid, but they're suggesting maybe not. Maybe that's the future. Maybe that's where we need to go.
Man augmented by machines and technology, huh?
Mm-hmm. All right, so that was those guys, Deleuze and Guattari, whatever. And now there's this guy, Georges Albert Maurice Victor Bataille, French intellectual working in philosophy, literature, sociology, anthropology, and the history of art, is a writing. This came from ChatGPT too, which included essays, novels, and poetry, explored such subjects as eroticism, mysticism, surrealism, and transgression. You guys are into surrealism. I suggest reading this guy.
I don't know him. I've never heard the name.
Yeah, you may have heard of one or two of his books, but Nick Land is big into Bataille. He wrote a book on it, and so we're getting into the idea of chaos and anti-humanism. We've already started talking a bit about anti-humanism. We're talking about light anti-humanism. We're going in a different direction now. Bataille asks what happens when reason encounters the sacred, excess, and death. The idea of that being is that you achieve a sort of transcendental experience. And if you pick up a copy of a book we're going to just see the cover of in a couple more slides, called Erotism, he includes within this kind of framework of the sort of the minimal transcendence, human sacrifice and cannibalism and incest.
Yee.
He's a Sadian, as in
Marquis de Sade?
Exactly.
Right, okay.
But I may make another plug for that movie. Say hello, I'm going to do it now because it's pertinent. It's not just a movie of graphic atrocities done to teenagers. There's also a strong philosophical component to it, which fits nicely into this. You should have a viewing party. I'll bring the popcorn.
The movie is not Salo, the one we spoke about before, but it's called Say It Now.
Salo. It's the one we talked about
Oh,
before.
it is Salo. Okay.
Salo.
Okay, right.
So Bataille asked what happens when reason encounters the sacred excess of death. Land takes that paradigm, switches it to what happens when human reason encounters autonomous technology, financial markets, and artificial intelligence. And you may be asking me at this point, where are all my direct quotes? Why am I not providing them? This is why. Somebody take a stab at reading that.
The Menger Sprunge
Seriously,
confronts
start
us
anywhere and read a
as
couple
an
of
immobile
segments.
quasi-solid figure described ungraspably in space. This is intrinsic to its mathematical or ideal character. Whoa, it's pretty heavy. How do you even wade through this to make sense out of
it? It is mapped in a geometry that does not disturb concepts of time, space, and abstraction, but infinity remains uncontaminated. It is not a labyrinth in Bataille's sense. It admits of absolute transcendence, subordination, ideal objectivity, and might nevertheless be a certain horizon of lucidity. Every page is like this.
This is Nick Land, huh?
This is Nick Land.
Wow.
Now, I actually read most of The Dark Enlightenment by Nick Land. It's a little bit more accessible, but he really likes to go out in the weeds. So, Georges Bataille criticizes the image of humans as purely irrational, self-interested, always seeking utility, and fully autonomous. Bataille emphasizes aspects of human life that resist rational controls, such as desire, eroticism, violence, death, sacrifice, ecstasy, waste, and excess, which we could probably also call sort of taboo or transgressive. And you may have heard of this book, The Story of the Eye.
I haven't.
I've not.
It is a work of erotic fiction, which is to say it's a dirty book. Fascinating story. Very, very, very in keeping with the Marquis de Sade, and will put you off eggs forever.
Oh.
So add that to your list, guys.
I don't know if I can.
If it comes out on audiobook, maybe.
I'm waiting for the movie. Of course, we're talking about transgression. What is a transgression? Prohibition that creates a boundary. Transgression is meaningful only because that boundary exists. If there were no prohibition, there would be nothing to transgress. This illustrates a paradox. Transgression depends on the existence of the very norms it appears to reject. It's almost like the desiring machine. For Bataille, acts of transgression have a quasi-religious dimension because they temporarily suspend the ordinary world of rules and utility. He asks what reason encounters the sacred excess of death, and we already talked about what Land says. That's another book that I just mentioned a couple slides ago. It's on City Lights Press, and since we're kind of promoting City Lights here to a degree, it's a good book, but it's not a book you want to leave around for the kids to see. He actually includes photographs of a guy dying or being killed by death by 1,000 cuts. Anybody?
Yeah. What does that refer to? I mean, is that literally a death?
They basically, kind of crucify a guy and they cut him open 1,000 times.
Yikes.
Yeah, the whole thing is supposed to take, the better part of a week. It's cruel. It's very unusual. And he includes a photograph of somebody going through the procedure.
How is that ever?
The take is that this guy who is absolutely in agony is actually reaching that sort of transgressive state that's close to ecstasy.
Ah, I see.
And he looks a little bit like St. Teresa does on the cover of the book. How are we doing, guys? The other guy that is a huge influence on Nick Land is this gentleman. I didn't bother putting a name because I figured you'd all recognize him.
I don't know him. Who is that?
That's H.P. Lovecraft.
Oh, okay.
I thought the Cthulhu for President, White Shoes of Lesser Evil would have been a clue.
Right.
All right, so what about Lovecraft? You may want to edit these slides because I don't have permission to use these pictures, but there's the source. I don't know if they're really public domain or not, but I thought at least for this, I might enjoy seeing these. So what is H.P. Lovecraft all about, and how does it relate? So Lovecraft basic theme is inhuman intelligence, and they always win. Humans don't fare well in his stories. There's this sense of dread that gathers steam as you go through his stories, and it ends with, like, apocalypse or something that is pointing to something apocalyptic involving such an inhuman intelligence. Cthulhu is the obvious example. So he features intelligences that are incomprehensible because they evolved under entirely different conditions. He holds to something that's called cosmic system. Cosmic system holds to the following sort of principles or precepts. The universe is unimaginably vast. Humanity occupies no privileged place within it. The cosmos is indifferent to human hopes, values, and suffering. There is no guarantee that reality is comprehensible or morally ordered.
That's pretty bleak.
Yep.
And then Land takes that and he talks about it in terms of technology and artificial intelligence. Rather than ancient alien gods, the inhuman intelligence is more likely to be distributed computation, financial markets, machine intelligence, and complex cybernetic systems. These systems operate according to logics that no individual human fully controls. And they're evolving is a bad word, they're being developed to the point where they become completely self-sustaining. Nick Land welcomes this.
Why? Why would you welcome the demise of your, species?
Because the universe is unimaginably vast, humanity occupies no privileged place, the cosmos is indifferent to human hopes, values, and suffering, and reality is neither comprehensible or morally ordered. He would actually make that an assertion. That's why. So, it's sort of like that Spengler saying that I'm thinking of making kind of my Facebook page. What do you call that thing at the top of your page?
Your avatar, your profile image or something?
Profile image.
Your banner.
Yeah. Optimism is cowardice.
Right.
Empathy is sinful.
Yeah, actually, I don't believe that, so...
I just brought that up because it appeared in print last week.
Resistance is futile.
So, inhuman intelligence, both Bataille and Lovecraft depict encounters with what overwhelms human understanding. Bataille treats such encounters as philosophically or essentially significant. Lovecraft frames them as sources of horror. How do you like these pictures, by the way?
Yeah, they're merging Tintin with Lovecraft, I guess, huh?
Yeah, he's got more. You should check this out.
I will.
It's been around for years, so I'm kind of hoping we can get away with it. Okay, so some basic concepts, building on what we've just talked about. Nick Land has this his own take on accelerationism. We talked about it in political terms. He's talking about it in technological terms. The inevitable speeding up of technological capitalism, which cannot be resisted. I would change that phrasing dramatically. Hyperstition is a word I've never come across outside of Nick Land. Ideas create the realities that they describe. It's not altogether that new an idea. That's almost the basis of hyperreality. Baudrillard, does that ring a bell? I got to stop asking it. I'm just going to say Baudrillard was a philosopher, French philosopher, who developed the whole idea of simulation as replacing reality, thus becoming hyper-reality. The perfect example of this is when I went to Tijuana and went to a Mexican restaurant. This Mexican guy came up to take my order, and he was wearing a big, fake Zapata mustache and a huge sombrero. Because the simulation of a Mexican is more Mexican than the Mexican himself.
This is also what Stephen Bannon believes.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
All of these guys share in this. The tech bros share in this. And a huge number of people who are around Trump, including Bannon, share in this. We create our real reality. And then everybody else catches up, and we've moved on to create another reality. This idea of techno-capital, we touched on this a few times. Capital behaves like an autonomous intelligence. You think about how the market works. This whole concept of the invisible hand, that's damn near metaphysical. That there are these kind of laws that humans themselves don't produce, but are produced by the machine itself, techno-capital being machine.
Oh, so like when Stephen Miller made investments worth $30 billion in oil right before the Iraqi war, that was all done by autonomous intelligence?
Well, he used capital itself as autonomous intelligence, is what I'm saying. He used it. It was a tool that he used, and he understood it, and he got the result he hoped for. But I think hyperstition and techno-capital kind of merge here. He had, the idea behind financial markets, is based on debt.
I'm thinking about all this in relationship. That's something that Valentine shared with me yesterday, called interstasis, which they're just now researching in terms of the human body. And I immediately asked her, how does that expand to the world and beyond? Do you know the term?
I don't know the term. What is interstasis?
There's a space between every cell in our body, and that it is interconnected with everything in our body. And I think about this in terms of the world, and I'm thinking about it in terms of what you have on the screen right here. The space between all these things and the interconnection of everything, which we cannot escape. And one of these things for me is thinking about the people in this group with the most power seem to be the guys that have the largest stacks of cash. And they believe that they are disconnected from all that is. And I think that is a complete misconception.
Well, go spend an afternoon at Ross. Look at all those people. Yeah, they are pretty much in a bubble. And that bubble is the result of a desire machine. You kind of see how this is beginning to meld into this interesting mindset that is foreign, very foreign to most of us, but seems obvious to the people who go down this line. Anti-humanism. Humans are not the center of evolution, and this is interesting. We are not the endpoint of evolution.
Agreed.
So, another thing to put in the back of our minds. The singularity. An interesting story about this. Well, not that interesting. I have an anecdote that is actually kind of dull. I had a friend in high school that shall remain unnamed, who got to the middle of an altercation and was knocked to the ground and made unconscious. And just like Androcles in the Land, I played Androcles. I went up and scraped him off the floor and walked him to the nurse's office, and then we became best friends thereafter. And I think about this guy. This is a guy that normally would have nothing to do with, nor he with me. He came from a very, 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 very wealthy family that lived in a town somewhat south of where you guys grew up and north of where I grew up. That begins with A.
Indeed.
Yeah. And so his family was pretty powerful and were all up into the financial world. He went off to a major university where he now lectures and runs his own VC firm. He's the guy that turned me on to the singularity, and this was maybe 10 years ago. So this thinking is not new. I mean, Nick Land wrote his Dark Enlightenment. I don't have the book in front of me, and I don't really feel like reaching for it, quite some time ago. Curtis Yarvin wrote his works quite some time ago. This stuff has been around, and it's gaining a lot of traction. The outside forces beyond human understanding, we'll jump into that a little bit later. The Dark Enlightenment, we're talking about that right now. So, what does this all mean? If somebody could read this, I'd really appreciate it.
I will. 1. A rejection of humanism. The humanist tradition, which emphasizes human dignity, rational agency, equality, and moral progress, is an error. Humans are not the privileged center of reality, but temporary products of larger evolutionary, technological, and economic processes. Human welfare is irrelevant. I am Scooter of Borg, prepared to be assimilated.
What I wanted to do was call out the absence.
Scooter, you described a bubble earlier, and I'm thinking the movie, I can't remember its name now, where all of these tech bros are at one time on the top of a mountain talking about the billions they had already gained from the world, as though that was some badge of honor. And it made me think about, well, that bubble is so narrowly conceived that it's not, and the idea of intelligence, as we've been discussing, doesn't incorporate any of those fundamental responses to life, such as parenting, providing a kind of caring impulse toward a young being. So whether it's human or any of a number of species that have that built in, this argument, this narrow constrained bubble that these people are living in and viewing the world, doesn't incorporate any of that ability. So it's not a desire. It's something infinitely different and much deeper, I think, to the experience of living that hasn't been incorporated into any of their thinking. So if anything is bubbleistic, it certainly is rational, logical conceptualization of what life is. They seem to be missing a huge part, and perhaps later they're going to incorporate, or others are. But right now, as I'm listening, I'm not hearing that they're describing the totality of the experience of life.
Good point.
Yeah.
I agree. It comes from a male point,
yes,
and it's very sociopathic and anti.
Yeah.
It is.
It's anti-life affirming in any way, shape, or form, and it's
exactly.
not nurturing, as you were saying, and it's
reductionist, because desire isn't our deepest impulse or drive. Hell, regeneration is.
Desire also is not solely connected to the brain. It's also connected to the heart. And issues of the heart are completely left out of what these guys are driving at.
Yeah, and the absence of that is so constraining that they're not intelligent enough necessarily to figure that out, to see that. Again, it's that patriarchy, that narrowness of our conceptualization that life is a linear progression and not at all interrelated to anything that you are in or moving through as you progress.
Well,
men are really dumb in that way, and so to have a whole philosophy that comes out and extols that narrow, constrained vision of the world is quite humorous. I step down now. I have to go back into earphone mode, so I will listen contentedly. I'm just absolutely amazed, Scooter, at what you're providing us. Powerful, powerful stuff.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just presenting. I didn't come up with this, thankfully. All right, so let's move on. Thank you for those thoughts, by the way. You're absolutely right. There is the whole aspect of human existence that is centered on affairs of the heart is completely missing. Completely missing.
And it's almost as though this is by men, for men only. And the whole concept of a feminine, maternal purpose in life is forgotten, or again reduced to lesser importance, which is what all patriarchy has done since time immemorial.
Well, I'd say if there's a subtext to everything we've talked about from the very beginning, it's this support of patriarchy.
Yeah.
These guys are upfront about it.
Yeah, very good. Yep.
Yeah. As were the traditionalists, they were upfront about it too.
Where are the women of the Dark Enlightenment? Are there any that are supporting
Well, I'm
this?
going to read you a section about this conference that Nick Land spoke at some point, not today.
Okay.
But the person who wrote the article described the demographic he appealed to as like 500 men and 3 women, something like that.
Yeah.
They're not part of the movement. Unwelcome, but why would they want to touch this? As you said, anything that's nurturing is basically seen as a throwback to our old biological days.
Mm-hmm.
Empathy is a sin.
Yeah.
Right.
All
I
right,
have to admire, the alt-right's directness, and their corruption of language. Very skilled.
Oh, yeah. So Nick Land is definitely a Nietzschean to a huge degree. I mean, he kind of goes beyond Nietzsche in some ways. So the questions Nietzsche would ask, what Nietzsche would say, is the questions, is this good, is this just, is this fair, are not the questions we should be asking. We should be asking, what forces produced these values? What do these values enable or inhibit? And whose interests do these values serve? That's not original with Nietzsche. That, to your right on the screen, is Niccolo Machiavelli. And if you've ever, read The Prince, he anticipated Nietzsche by a number of centuries. I really like that picture. Affirmation of impersonal processes. Roy, you want to take this one again?
Sure. 3, affirmation of impersonal processes. Affirmation of processes that moral theorists evaluate critically. Technological acceleration, capitalism, automation, artificial intelligence. The processes are historically and technologically self-propelling. Moral approval or disapproval has no effect on their development. I read it, but I don't know if I understand it.
It's very simple. That list, technological acceleration, capitalism, automation, artificial intelligence, is happening. It exists, and it's going to grow like a tumor. But we don't have chemotherapy. Normally, our moral authority would be that chemotherapy. But at this point, it has no effect on these processes.
Wow.
So it's happening whether you want it to or not. So we were talking earlier in the Bright Distant Future broadcast about protesting against AI.
Correct, yeah. That's futile. It's ridiculous.
Well, I'm not saying futile and ridiculous. I'm saying they say it's futile.
Oh, got you. Exactly right.
Yeah.
Again, though, looking at that last line, moral approval or disapproval has no effect on their development. Completely centered in the idea that we have no say, we have no connection to nurture or heart or anything that builds or actually contributes positively to the world.
I'll give you an interesting example that I think kind of applies. Many of you guys are aware of this, but apparently AI companies, some AI companies, I don't know who, have been ransacking rare and antiquarian bookstores.
I just heard that, yeah.
Yeah, and they're taking these books, they're scanning them into the machine learning processes associated with AI. And in order to do that, they have to break the spines, pull the pages, do the scan, and then they shred the books. Now, I think this relates. There's a sort of humanism behind rare and antiquarian books. We want to maintain them. We want to keep them. We want them for posterity. We find them, beautiful or interesting or instructive, educational, but they're all being fed into the desire machine. All right. Ethics as intensity. All right. So, influenced by Bataille and Deleuze, Land is often more interested in intensity than duty, rather than asking, what is the right action? It's which processes increase complexity, novelty, transformation, or power. This reflects a shift away from rule-based ethics towards the Fight Club. Fight Club is probably the most Nietzschean movie I've ever seen in my life. That also gets a Scooter recommendation.
Crazy.
Yeah, add it to your list. I think it's well worth it. It's a philosophical movie. I think it's well worth watching. And it's done. It's well done. And it has a very surprising ending. All right, onward and forward. A rejection of egalitarian morality. Moral systems that presuppose equality or human universal rights are products of philosophical assertion and historical developments rather than objective truth. Those are two flags that I found on anarcho-capitalist sites.
Don't tread on inequality. That's classic.
And the other one is an anti-egalitarian semi-swastika. Well, that's kind of what's going on here, which rolls right back to Singapore. Intelligence over comfort. The expansion of a machine intelligence matters more than preserving existing human relations, or arrangements, rather. Humanity has no privileged moral status if more capable forms of intelligence emerge. So there's Agent Smith to kind of bring the point home. Please tell me you all saw The Matrix.
Yeah.
Another interesting, I don't think it was very good a movie, but I thought it presents some really interesting ideas. Among them is this one about humanity has no privileged moral status if more capable forms of intelligence emerge, and throw the Terminator in there as well. The singularity. The human was never a final or stable category. Land is influenced by Nietzsche's critique of human exceptionalism, Deleuze, Guattari's anti-humanism, Lovecraft's cosmic perspective, and he sees humanity as a transitional form. It is not the endpoint. Humanity is not the endpoint of evolution. It is a platform from which other forms of intelligence emerge. And that's a Chinese military robot, which they say are ready for the field. So, do you remember this slide?
I do, yeah. That's
We started with this. It was the very first slide I presented in the Christian Nationalist thing. The most intelligent inhabitants of the future won't be men or monkeys. They'll be machines, the descendants of today's computers. Now present-day electronic brains are complete morons, but that will not be true in another generation. They'll start to think, and eventually they'll completely outthink their makers. Is it depressing? I don't see why it should be. We superseded the Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal, and we presume we're an improvement. I think we should regard it as a privilege to be stepping stones to greater things. I can't read that, so I'm just assuming that's what it says. I suspect that organic and biological evolution has come to its end, and now we are at the precipice of the inorganic. That's Arthur C. Clarke.
right. That's full circle. You brought it all the way back to the beginning again. Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Well, that was where we're going. This is the roadmap that we've been on to get here.
That's an interesting statement, though. I suspect that organic or biological evolution is about to come to its end. That assumes that consciousness has nothing to do with it.
Yeah. Consciousness could very well be an evolutionary cul-de-sac for all we know.
I don't know if I believe that.
I don't know if I believe it either, but that might actually be the case, depending on what comes next. And if these guys are right, what does machine consciousness look like?
Yeah, let's get rid of all those pesky humans that are messing us up.
So then there's this concept of the outside. I think this is fairly important. We think of the universe as multidimensional and metaphysical constructs. We've talked about a few of those in the context of this. The outside, however, is neither physical nor metaphysical, is beneath and beyond human worlds. The outside is the name given for those impersonal forces, technological, such as AI, economic, such as capitalism, and the cosmic, the abyss, that neither care about or even are aware of human meanings or survival. So we are at a point where the outside is beginning to penetrate the inside. That's me, that's not Land. But that's the whole idea. It's that cosmicism that H.P. Lovecraft had. So far as human life or even evolution or life itself is concerned, it doesn't matter. Nothing human makes it out of the near future. Read that again.
Nothing human makes it out of the near future. So he has a pretty bleak view that it's a pretty imminent demise of humans, huh?
He doesn't see it as bleak.
Not
He
bleak.
celebrates it.
Right, because it's the natural, if that's the right word, progression. It's the progression. It's the way things are going, the way things will go.
Yeah. Human is no longer necessary to the course of an evolutionary process. Okay, so next week we're going to continue with the deeper dive to the crazy mind of Nick Land. And if you thought this was nuts, you guys just wait. We're going to talk about Lemurians.
Awesome. Well, thank you for bringing all of this to us. You've opened some windows and doors. I don't know if I wanted them open, but you have, and you've shed light, if that's the right word, on the Dark Enlightenment. And I think it's important that we understand this, even in some rough sense, because it looks like a lot of people are acting upon this and embracing this way of thinking, that we need to be aware. And I appreciate the effort and work you've
Not everybody goes as far as Nick Land does, but they're on the same trajectory.
That was a pretty intense episode, I'll tell you.
You think?
Yeah.
Hey, thank you so much, Scooter. Thank you, Eddie and Craig, and I'm Roy. Thank you for visiting A Bold and Distant Future, and come back again. The Bright Endarkenment.
The Bright Endarkenment.
The Bright Endarkenment continues. We appreciate you being here. Thank you.